What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if 2022 has been a weak year for video games, at least so far. And the answer is complicated, but I'll go with my controversial opinion just to start this video. I'm going to say the answer is yes. Now, I'll, of course, explain myself, but I also want to bring in last year and obviously maybe a couple other examples than just last year. But the reason I bring up last year is that it really is, I think, a comparable to this year. I really think both of the last two, like this year so far, again, I think it's going to change. September, October, November is going to be massive. You're going to have those huge hit games, or hopefully hit games, right, that have either been delayed, right, like a game like a Hogwarts Legacy that should have come out so far. Gotham Knights should have come out so far. God of War Ragnarok. You can go down a list, right? You could argue Starfield, it was supposed to come out in November, which would help this year overall. And that's a big part of this, right? Delays that pushed games that should have been in 2021 into 2022, and then kind of delayed them further. Delayed them into the very tail end of this year. And then we still don't even know if some of those games are going to hit. I assume we're still going to get at least one or two game delays in the fall, that games are supposed to come out in the fall. They're going to get pushed one more time into next year. So the reason I bring up last year is because I really do think it is somewhat similar. This year has been weak, but at the same time, it's been strong. February is oftentimes looked at for this year as a pretty strong month for games. Horizon, Forbidden West, I think a game like Sifu, although more indie, was still very popular, sold really well. People really liked it. I absolutely loved the game. And then, of course, Elden Ring. So the talk around Elden, and I know I've talked about Elden Ring quite a bit, and even in some senses, I'm getting tired of it in talking about it in this way. Elden Ring, I really do think, skews kind of how this year has been so far for games. Right now, we actually do know the overall numbers for games are down. Like the first half of this year, they're down by, I think, like 10 to 15%. I think it's more like 12, 13%, but it kind of ranges depending on what you're talking about. So statistically, game sales are down this year compared to last year. Last year had some big games in the first half of the year as well, but again, kind of specific, like Resident Evil Village. That was a huge one, but that very specific game. Returnal, that was a big one, very specific game. This year, I feel like kind of had the same thing. Lego Star Wars comes out, it does insanely well. Elden Ring comes out, it's a top 10 selling game in the US of all time. That obviously is going to help, I think, the month of February and I guess maybe even the year in games. Now, one thing I do want to make very clear, right, because maybe I'm taking like a antagonistic approach to this whole thing. I've been on record multiple times, and I'd like to go back on record right now in front of all of you. When I defend gaming, or even if I've defended gaming this year, I normally defend it from the, the comments that I'll get where it's like there's nothing to play. There's been no games released. I don't like comments like that because, and I don't think this is the same conversation, right? When people say there's nothing to play, there's been nothing that's released this year, that is false. And I also think there has been some kind of hidden gems that have been released so far this year, just like there were last year. Arcana Bridge of Spirits came out last year. Not many people played it, but it was, I think, a game that was well worth a lot of people's time, right? So that's the argument that I'm not a big fan of. In terms of like hits, big games, lots of games, consistency in games releasing, that is where I will take the side of, yes, while I don't believe, I'm against the idea that there's been no games this year, okay? I don't agree with that. But if you were to tell me, has this year been weak? Has this year, been, I guess, a lower class than some of the past years? I would say, yes, it has definitely felt that. I think this entire year has really been held up overall, again, not entirely, but generally, from February as a month, because you had Dying Light, Sifu, Horizon, and Elden Ring. All four of those were in the same month. So it was really held up by that. And then, honestly, I would argue Lego Star Wars, which was April, the very first week of April. Besides that, yes, there's been games. Again, I'm not saying there hasn't, but they've been just all over the place and not very consistent. There's been several weeks where there's been nothing really big. You go back 2 years ago. Now, 2 years ago was during the start of all of this nonsense around the world, right? Some terrible, terrible stuff. And even during that, we got Final Fantasy VII's remake. We got Animal Crossing. We got Doom. You had The Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima in back-to-back months in June or July. By the way, this is separate from your opinions on the games, right? I know The Last of Us is divided, but it was a huge game that released in June of 2020, right? That's factually the case. But you know what I mean? Like, that's honestly the reason why I look at this year and say, yeah, it's kind of weak, because you look at you look at 2020, I mean, you can go back, you can go 2019, 2018. There has been weak years. The thing is, and it's something like, yes, I guess I'm complaining about it, quote unquote. I don't really look at this as complaining. I look at this as like I'm analyzing it. If you want to look at it as complaining, I'm complaining about this year. But the thing is, you do know that this does happen, or at least I know. You know what I mean? Like, I know this stuff happens. There has been down years in gaming. There's been down years in film, and oftentimes they make up for it in somewhere else, right? Now, it's a tricky thing for games because I think it's kind of a tale of two different years. It's just the first half, not even the first, right? That's kind of the actual even trickier thing, is through August, it's been very, like, sporadic. It's been all over the place, besides February. But then when we get into September, like, you're putting your foot on the pedal and you're not stopping. September and October and November really would, quote unquote, save this year for, I think, a majority of people, right? Because your favorite game may be, or the game you're most anticipating, may be releasing in the next couple months. God of War Ragnarok, Hogwarts Legacy, you know, Gotham Knights. Maybe it's a Plague Tale, right? Maybe it's Scorn, because that game was delayed from last year to this year. You know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting at the end of this year. How do you, and this is, I'm not really, again, I don't look at this as complaining. This is like a conversation to me. How do you look at this year? It's a question. How do you look at this year when we get to the end of it? I guess it really is a year of two different kind of stories, right? It was a year of a lot of games coming out at the very end, and then it was a year of definitely big hit name games. So you have Hogwarts makes it this year. Hogwarts is gigantic. God of War is a gigantic name. Again, you have Elden Ring, which statistically is like one of the best-selling games ever. So, you know, I mean, that really helps the year, I think, overall when you look at it. It's interesting. I mean, last year you had, like, Halo Infinite, so you had a big juggernaut name. But again, like, the last 2 years have been overall rough. The consistency is not there. It doesn't help when every game under the sun gets delayed, right? I'm not blaming. Like, we know what to blame. I think we definitely know what to blame. I guess I'm not, like, whining over it because, again, it just is the way it is. But it's interesting, like, when we'll look back at this year, right? Going, like, I always think of 2011. I don't know how many other people do. I think there were definitely other big years that people reference when it comes to, like, the biggest years for gaming. 2011, I think, is talked about, and I definitely look at it. For me personally, it was my biggest year in terms of, I remember just being a fan. I still am, but I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have any of that. I was just a fan of games, and I just remembered how many games I would write on a piece of paper. And there were so many games, and big, not small, right? And again, like, small games actually tend to maybe be better than big games. So I'm not really saying about quality. Again, I'm just saying about, like, the hits that you'll see in the news or that makes the headlines, right, on articles and stuff. That's kind of what I'm talking about. There were gigantic game after gigantic game that came out in 2011. So we haven't, you know, the last couple of years, we haven't had that. I think 2020 was that year, to be honest with you. And then 2021, 2022 has been lower. Yet again, 2022 may be saved this last 3-month stretch. I guess December, let's count that. So 4-month stretch of the year. And then we'll see what 2023 brings, because it should bring a lot. But then it's like, I don't know, you know, again, because all the big games that you maybe hear, I mean, like Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a big one, Starfield is a big one. Next year we'll have gigantic ones. I just also feel like most of the big games we've seen that is coming, you know, after this year, let's say, probably is coming like 2024 and beyond, right? Like, you see a Wonder Woman game and you're like, that's 3 years away. You see, like, a Star Wars Eclipse, you say that's 30 years away. Like, these games are not coming out in my lifetime, right? It's like, you know what I mean? Like, next year is going to be big. I think next year will be fun. And again, I really want to stress this because I don't know what kind of comments I'll get, but I'm not saying anything about quality. Like, again, Arcana Bridge of Spirits is one of my favorite games last year. Life is Strange True Colors, Guardians of the Galaxy. Those are some of my favorite games last year. You don't need to be Halo or God of War to be the best game that comes out in the year, right? It's just the name. And I guess that's what I'm kind of talking about in this video. But it's interesting. So let me know what you guys think. When you think of the year, what do you think of? Do you think it's been bad? Do you think it's going to get better? How would you view it? Let me know. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Bell icon turned on so you know when all these videos go up. If you want to follow or support me anywhere else, all my social media is in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.